Hello there, I'm Rahila Mohammed. This is the News Hour, live from Doha, coming up in the next 60 minutes. A fuel truck has exploded in a rebel-held city in northern Syria, killing at least 63 people. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which monitors violence in the war-torn country, says it happened in front of a courthouse in Azaz. There's been no claim of responsibility. It's the third bombing in the city this week. Al-Jazeera's Amir Abad is in Azaz and sent us this report.
We are now at the center of the city of Azaz in Aleppo's northern countryside. We are at the main market, which was hit by a car bomb that killed and injured dozens of civilians. Many victims are still under the rubble and civil defense teams are trying to get them out. As we can see, many shops and vehicles have been burned down. This building was used by civilians. It has turned to rubble. There are many people who are still trapped underneath. In the same area, there is a court, which is recognized by a number of armed opposition groups. It has been the target of several car bombs, most of which have been claimed by ISIL. Azaz has been the target of many car bombs claimed by ISIL. Amir Abad, Al Jazeera, Azaz.
Meanwhile, fighting in Wadi Barada continues to overshadow a Syrian ceasefire brokered by Russia and Turkey. Government forces launched an attack 2 weeks ago to try to take back the area near Damascus. The fighting has knocked out Wadi Barada's water pumping station, which provides water to the capital. Hashim Al-Bahar reports from Gaziantep near the Turkey-Syria border.
Syrian rebels say Hezbollah fighters used this truck to force open roads leading to Wadi Barada before it was destroyed by a rocket, temporarily halting an offensive by pro-government militias. Artillery shells continue to land in rebel positions. Government troops control surrounding hills, giving them high ground advantage over opposition fighters. Thousands of people are trapped by the fighting. Syrian army commanders say the campaign will continue until they control a strategic water station that provides the capital Damascus with drinking supplies. The opposition warns the ceasefire might collapse if the army campaign continues. But the army says its attacks target ISIL and Nusra fighters who are excluded from the ceasefire deal, which was brokered by Russian and Turkish diplomats. As airstrikes eased elsewhere, protesters took to the streets denouncing the Syrian government and President Bashar al-Assad. They are urging rebel factions to unite and defend civilians. Rebels also rallied in Idlib, the final remaining opposition stronghold in northern Syria. The province may be the Syrian army's next target after taking over Aleppo. Syrians here remain defiant.
We want to tell the world that our revolution continues. People are now coming out from their hideouts, from under the rebel with one message: either we win or we die.
The sporadic fighting could jeopardize efforts by Russia and Turkey to narrow differences among Syria's warring parties. If the ceasefire holds, it may boost the possibility of resuming political talks between the Syrian government and the opposition. But if the truce collapses, Syria might further slip towards more war and uncertainty. Hashim Al-Bahar, Al Jazeera, Gaziantep, along the Turkish-Syrian border.
Security forces in Saudi Arabia have shot dead 2 men with suspected links to ISIL. Taya al-Sairi and Talal al-Sayedi opened fire when they were surrounded by police at a house in the capital of Riyadh. Officers say explosive belts and homemade bombs were found inside the building. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen stopped in Houston, Texas, on her way to visit allies in Latin America. This follows last month's controversial congratulatory call from after Tsai had given to President-elect Donald Trump. China views Taiwan as part of its territory and has asked the U.S. to block Tsai from passing through. Alan Schofler has more.
President Tsai Ing-wen arrives in Houston, Texas, greeted by hundreds of people, carrying flowers, waving flags, showing off the new face of power in Taiwan. While this visit has angered Beijing, this crowd is delighted. On the eve of Tsai's visit, the local Taiwanese community center was abuzz with preparations and the excitement of an entirely unofficial appearance on American soil. It follows this prearranged post-election phone call between Tsai and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, a conversation breaking with decades of diplomatic protocol. It was the first such high-level contact between the U.S. and Taiwan since the 1970s.
That made China really mad about that phone call.
And it was a bold move for two new heads of state, one in power less than a year, one yet to move into the White House.
To be a leader of a country, you have to take some risk. If the benefit is the pro is bigger than the con, you probably have to do it after them.
That very public phone call and Tsai's presence here undercuts the one China concept that has governed U.S.-China relations for nearly 40 years, that self-governing Taiwan remains part of China. And it sends a clear signal that traditional ties and long-standing relationships in Asia and around the world could change when the Trump administration takes power.
The big question, of course, for this very excited crowd and for people around the world is, will there be any kind of contact between the Taiwanese president and President-elect Trump during her very brief stopovers in the U.S.?
Neither camp will confirm any planned talks on this trip.
She wants to develop the relationship with the United States and even wants to see President-elect Trump if it is possible. But I do not think that that goal is going to be realized.
President Tsai's tour also includes 4 Latin American countries. She will stop again in the U.S. in San Francisco on her way home. Alan Schaffler, Al-Jazeera, Houston, Texas.
The UN has urged Egypt to ensure an Al-Jazeera journalist who has been detained there is treated fairly. Mahmoud Hussein was arrested at Cairo airport on December 20th while visiting family. Egyptian authorities have filmed forced confessions without his lawyer present. Al-Jazeera is demanding Hussein's unconditional release.
The UN trusts that the Egyptian authorities will safeguard Mahmoud Hussein's due process rights, including the right to a fair trial. We appeal for this case to be resolved in accordance with Egypt's own international obligations to protect freedom of expression and freedom of opinion.
Now, Al Jazeera has issued a statement in response to Hussein's arrest. It says the network denies all the allegations against our colleague as baseless and holds the Egyptian authorities responsible for his well-being while he is in their custody. The statement goes on to say that it also rejects the detention and demands the immediate release of our colleague Mahmoud Hussein. Al Jazeera also warns the Egyptian authorities against any attempt to torture our colleague and force him into false confessions. Now, the leaders of Turkey and Iraq have met in Baghdad to discuss the unauthorized presence of 500 Turkish troops in northern Iraq. There are growing tensions over the troops in Bashika, where Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim has been ignoring Iraqi requests to withdraw. There have been conflicting reports over the outcome of the bilateral meeting. Iraqi state media says a deal has been reached. However, Yildirim told journalists otherwise.
The Bashika situation. We have discussed this issue. This wasn't born out of pleasure, but rather out of need. We see that important distances to clean the area of ISIL have been covered. In line with this, we will reach a friendly solution.
Flights have resumed at Fort Lauderdale Airport in Florida, where a gunman killed 5 people on Friday. 26-year-old Esteban Santiago, a former soldier in the National Guard, is being questioned over the attack. Alaskan police said they recently returned the weapon used in the shooting to the suspect as he underwent a mental evaluation. Santiago claimed to hear voices and thought he was being controlled by the U.S. intelligence agency. Andy Gallagher has more.
Within seconds of the first shots being fired inside Fort Lauderdale's airport, passengers ran for cover, desperate to escape the gunman. According to police, the passenger, who they believe was acting alone, recovered a weapon from his checked bag before loading it and opening fire inside the terminal.
People started running this way and running that way.
It didn't seem serious, and then it was, and it changed that.
Eyewitnesses say the man only stopped firing when he ran out of ammunition. It's then reported he lay down before being arrested by police.
We have the shooter in custody. He's unharmed. No law enforcement fired any shots. The subject is being interviewed by a team of FBI agents and Broward Sheriff's Office homicide detectives.
The gunman has been named as 26-year-old Esteban Santiago, a former member of the National Guard who was discharged 4 months ago. He'd served in Puerto Rico and Iraq before moving to Alaska to look for work. His brother has told media the suspect has mental health issues.
The individual did walk into our Anchorage office in November. He came in and spoke with FBI agents. At that time, he clearly stated that he did not intend to harm anyone. However, his erratic behavior concerned FBI agents that were interviewing him, and they contacted local police and turned him over to the local police. He was taken into custody by the local police and transported to a medical facility for a mental health evaluation.
Officials say it's too early to suggest any potential motive. Licensed gun owners in the US are legally allowed to travel with weapons. Andy Gallagher, Al-Jazeera.
The FBI has offered a reward of $20,000 for the information that helps to identify the man who shot a U.S. consul in Mexico. Security camera footage released by the consulate in Guadalajara shows a man in a purple T-shirt waiting by the exit. He then shoots at a car as it leaves the office. The victim is being treated at a local hospital for a gunshot wound to the chest. Questions arise on the fundamental ethics of technology. Jacob Ward reports.
The technology at the Consumer Electronics Show has in many cases dragged companies into a future no one really understands yet.
What's interesting is that most of the vehicles out there today even are 96% of the time they're idle, right? So it's parked in your garage or at your office.
So Honda is preparing for a day when you might loan your self-driving vehicle to other people.
If somebody was to summon the vehicle, request it, you could approve it through your smartphone.
But what happens if someone borrows your car and does something criminal with it? Whose fault is that? These new technologies raise questions that haven't been answered yet. Imagine the ethical quandaries of a world in which every single one of us has our own personal drone, and it follows us around wherever we go. At this show, the best way to understand the dangers of drones is to talk to the people selling systems like the Expeller, which disables drones remotely.
If we switched on a jammer here, I think we would make ourselves many enemies. Think about the next Super Bowl. There could be a drone flying over the stadium, just carrying 500 grams of sugar, of white powder, looking like anthrax, dropping it over the crowd, causing mass panic.
The technology here can remotely open your house, monitor your children, and transport your parents to a doctor's appointment. It's easy to imagine the convenience of these breakthroughs. The harder thing to do at a show like this is imagine what else they might mean. Jacob Ward, Al Jazeera, Las Vegas.